I'd like to welcome Bhavna Imran. Welcome, Bhavna.
Thank you, Parul.
So, Bhavna is the regional communication leader for Corteva Agrisciences and Agrosciences. And as we talked about before, Bhavna is going to help us understand how communication is evolved and kept pace with how the farmer is evolving. It's no longer, the do biga zameen image that we all have, the farmer. It's a very evolved with it farmer, and how do we need to communicate with them has also completely changed. And not surprisingly, digital is in, but what was a surprise to me was the kind of digital communication that is taking place with small landowner farmers. Not even talking about the large ones. So with that, welcome Bhavna. We'll follow the same format, Q&A for a while, audience questions, and then the poll. To start off our conversation, Bhavna, do you think that the digital communication has reached a tipping point post COVID, and this has touched the agriculture sector as well, which traditionally people won't think that it would have such an impact?
Yeah, uh, great question to start with. Parul, before I actually respond to that question, let me give you a brush stroke of who this audience is. I think it's important for us to know what we are talking about. So this farming audience is about 55% of India's population depends on that. So look at the numbers. We're talking about 150 million kind of farming base. And this audience traditionally has always looked for extremely fact-based information to be told to them. They are not the ones who are having the openness or tolerance to listen to anything else other than the fact-based information. And also what happens with this particular audience is trust becomes important. I mean, as communicators, I guess all of us talk about trust, but for this audience, one single decision based on a action from a communication could actually make or break their subsistence for the year. I mean, that's at a short level, small level, right? I mean, at a larger scale, we're talking about the food security of the country. So I think that much, the responsibility of a communicator becomes that much important. The third thing, I think it's important that most of the farmers, like you rightly mentioned, are striving really hard to move from their old ways to newer ways of communication, new ways of agriculture farming. So when they're doing that, I believe that communications has to sort of corroborate with their transition. I mean, we can't be telling them stories which are far ahead or previous. We have to literally go with their thinking in terms of where are they in their state of mind in terms of the moving from the old ways to the new ways. I think keeping all of that in mind, we've tried different ways to talk to them. Typically, these farmers have got most of the information to increase their yield and output or to better their agricultural practices through their either peers, through the village conversations, or through these independent consultants who are in the villages talking to them about it. Come pandemic, all of that disappeared. Most of the farmers were left alone to take all of their decisions completely by themselves. I mean, imagine one set of what kind of seed to buy would completely change the way he would look at things. At that point of time, they were looking at reliable, trustworthy sources to reach out to. And we had leveraged all the digital communication channels available. And like you said, these traditional farmers are actually technology converts. You'll be surprised how many Facebook live streaming sessions we had with these people. You'll be surprised that we actually got onto Zoom conversations. We got onto group talk and WhatsApp messages. I mean, and we are talking about large numbers. So we have separate channels, I mean, separate Facebook pages for each of these messages, each of these specific farmers to go out. And I think that for us, I mean, as communicators, it lent us on a platter the ability to do micro storytelling. I mean, today, if I want to go and tell a farmer about water stewardship or save water, I will not reach out to all the farmers in the country. I will reach out to only those farmers who are actually working on high water consumption plants. So only a particular region, that particular sliver of farmers, telling them more relatable stories. So typically, what does a storytelling do, right? Inform, inspire, and connect. All these digital channels have actually helped me to do these three things in an extremely wonderful manner. We had some very successful anecdotes about how some of these farmers connected on Facebook programs and actually talked among themselves and came out with some market linkage programs, formed some farmer producer organizations, So very interesting stories which came out by using these newer channels. I think, and this is just the beginning, I would say.
So it's truly micro storytelling which is taking place, and in an area where people perhaps would not even may not automatically think about that. That's where it's happening. And Bhavna, you also have a very interesting peer guidance program or peer sharing program called the Prabhupta program. Uh, could you share with us the experience of storytelling within that program?
Sure. Surprisingly, again, 50% of our agricultural force, not just in India, but across the world, are women. But for some reason, when we conjure up an image of a farmer in our head, it is a dhoti-clad man working in the fields, but we can't imagine that women actually are contributing to the decision making of farming. They are right in the center of the entire family. So for us, women farmers became the necessary target audience. I mean, they are the ones who we need to talk to. So we started a program a couple of years ago called Prabhupta. So this program was launched in states like Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, where your quintessential Didi, who knew it all, was going around giving information. But the only difference between this particular Didi was she actually told reliable, trustworthy stories, fact-based stories about better agronomy practices, how to plant better, what is the way to save water, how to use drip irrigation. But she did this in the traditional story, how, I mean, I think we've told stories for years, Ravi. It's very intrinsic to our Indian culture. So this Pravakta women went around telling these stories, their own success stories about how things worked, and in a way the other farmers could relate. So they are essentially Corteva ambassadors talking about best farming practices in the environment which is very traditionally suited to the village setup. So that, I think, for us, that combination worked. Women, storytelling, group conversations, and the credibility of listening to peers. I think all of this just worked perfectly fine. And we've, I think, in the last 1 year, reached out to about 90,000 plus women farmers. And these women farmers are now, it's like literally the multi-level marketing tanks. They are the ones who are going around participating in a lot of storytelling activities across, and reaching out to larger number of people.
That's actually very true because while shooting documentaries in areas like Uttarakhand and Andhra Pradesh, I've noticed the high incidence of women working in the field. In fact, in Uttarakhand, the only time I've seen a male farmer working is when they were running the hull. That women
Mm.
won't do, but everything else they were doing from watershed management and to planting seeds and everything else they were doing. So it's really interesting to know that women emerged as a major target. Not target is the wrong word. As a major stakeholder for you
Yeah.
in this process. So, given the kind of work that your company has been doing over the last couple of years, what can you tell us about how the profile of the farmer has changed as a consumer for your products and information, and how have you? Of course, you've shared a lot about how the storytelling and engagement has changed, but I would love some more insights on that.
So again, the Lagan farmer is whom we think of when we think of a farmer. I'm not saying that these have completely changed. I mean, they still are, lesser educated as compared to your city counterparts, as compared to an average male middle class Indians. But you will be surprised at their technology conversion. I think the amount of data they consume, the kind of social platforms these people are on, is very interesting. So what happens now is these are farmers, and not just young farmers. These are, farmers who are talking about 55 years or 60 years. They're all looking at social media for their conversations. But that also means that they are facing the same issue like we are all facing, information clutter. All of them are now absolutely clamored with ads. They're clamored with, we are literally fighting for attention from the rest of the brands and rest of the, so it is important for us now to tell the stories in a different way. So the first thing we do is tell sharp, relatable stories. I have to talk to a farmer about alternative rice planting. I go to just the Facebook page, pick the group of farmers in Madhya Pradesh, and tell them a story of how Reena Yadav did very well. Reena Yadav, the agri entrepreneur, she's done XYZ and she's managed to get These are the results. So suddenly you're able to catch the attention of the farmers. So I think sharper messages is something which we have to do right now. It's always been I think a difficult thing for us as communicators, but it is getting even more difficult. The other thing is, like, I think, like always, it is, I think India has got such a large expanse of languages and dialects. For us to reach a certain farmer in that particular dialect is difficult. Digital communications or not, you'll have to reach these farmers. What has happened with social media emerging as the main channel, we're able to do a lot of visual storytelling. We've never thought our Facebook pages. I mean, I've spent so much time getting the right kind of imagery or right kind of messages. So extreme heavy reliance on visual storytelling is something which we are now resorting to. And I think our industry just lends itself very well to do that, except that we need to have a right kind of the photographer going around and shooting the right kind of landscapes. But I think that's become very important for us. The other thing I think I would say is engagement levels. Today, if a farmer has a question on a particular seed or wants to give a compliment on how well a particular agrochemical is done, he's resorting to Twitter. They reach out to us and tell us how it has worked or how it has not worked. So it is important for us to keep up the engagement levels. So our stories right now, I think the success of our stories is also measured in kinds of engagement we are creating. Traditionally, we told something, we just kept passing passive information on, but we never waited for this engagement to happen. Here, the engagement is here and now. And that is what we are, I think, constantly in quest of. And fourth one is, I think it's transparency. And like I told before, farmers do want fact-based information, but now they're ready to validate these facts. If I say a particular planting method helps you save X amount of water, I actually have to show them how that water saving is calculated, or I'll have to tell them how the soil health becomes better. If I don't do that, the entire brand story becomes questionable. So right now, everything is it's becoming much more transparent and much more two-way. I think that's sort of a huge leap in terms of how things have worked before and how things are working for this particular audience.
That's really interesting because we're talking about an evolving farmer who's becoming much more empowered and truly become a customer. So than the image of the farmer who is subject to the capricious nature of nature and vulnerable in so many ways that it's difficult to calculate. So that's really been an interesting insight, Bhavna. My next question is really about how has the whole evolution taking place, the evolution that is taking place. You talked about visual storytelling being in the core of how you're communicating, and I was really intrigued to know that YouTube influencers have come in. And I thought maybe they would be senior ones, but you're actually saying that's not the case. Can you share more on that?
Yes, sure. There's a gentleman called Nankishore. He's a 12th pass, I think early 20s. This guy actually landed a trip to Nigeria recently. He is, I think, from a very small village in Madhya Pradesh, if I'm not wrong. You know why he landed a trip to Nigeria? It's an all-funded trip to Nigeria because the Papaya Association of Nigeria invited him to share with them the best practice. He actually has a YouTube channel where he's talking about how to grow papaya better. And the followership and the subscribers increased so much, and some of his subscribers in Nigeria followed the advice given by him on the YouTube channel, and that became a success. So in the next season, they invited him to come there in person and talk about it. This gentleman has about 2.9 lakh followers, and he's just hardly early 23 or 24. And this is not just one farmer. When I tasked my team and agency to look at YouTube influencers, I thought they'll come back with a short list of YouTube influencers and saying, 100 followers, 200 followers for each of them. I think one of the YouTube influencers I saw, he was about early 30s in Punjab. He had about 5.4 lakh subscribers, 5.4 lakh subscribers, and about 430 videos in about 250 days. I mean, look at the numbers we are talking about. This gentleman uploads one video almost every 1.5 days. And he talks not just about he has some great stories to tell about what kind of irrigation should be used. Should we use soil fertilizers? Should you look at what kind of safety you should follow because of COVID? If they need some, and these people are able to actually get the audience to act upon their videos. I mean, and that's Nankishore story is a big example of that. So I think it's not just one. I mean, this is YouTube fraternity is growing, and I believe that it is growing because, like we're speaking, what the education levels are still a little lower, and if they are looking at this YouTube community as a fraternity whom they can fall back on. They can fall back on, learn from. I mean, peer learning is happening. Learning through success stories is happening, and learning through see and tell is happening. Show and tell is happening. So I think it was a super eye opener for all of us. I mean, I always thought that my daughter looks at a YouTube influencer and picks this fancy lipstick up. But here you're talking about a YouTube influencer being watched, and decisions on what to sow, how to harvest, and how to sell in the market are being spoken about. I mean, I think that's like fabulous, and I think that's what what social media has done to it, and it's super interesting stories coming from there.
So YouTube is truly democratizing access to knowledge and access to outcome-based knowledge. So
Absolutely.
that is really fascinating. Bhavna, this has been a really wonderful discussion. I'm going to open it up for questions now, and I'm also launching the poll on the main takeaways from Bhavna's session. So just take a look. The poll is going to be up soon. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions, please do go ahead. Abhishek, would you like to kick off the discussion?
No, I think it was very interesting to obviously know the discussion around the use of influencers and YouTube, right? I mean, the fact that I think a lot of attention, as Bhavna said, is paid to the influencers. And I'm not discrediting those influencers which are making decisions on what to buy on a day-to-day basis. But really the impact an influencer on the farming side can have on the life of a farmer, right? It's really the sow that he's going to do for the entire season, and his house is going to run on it. And that is the kind of responsibility those influencers have. I think my question to Bhavna would be the fact that what are the other examples or areas that Corteva is kind of using in the digital world, especially in a COVID environment, right? Where, a lot of it was more physical interface with farmers, physically meeting them, and that changed for you. So what are the learnings and what did you do there? And then when you come out of the COVID world, would you go back to the physical way of doing it, or it'll be a mix? And how do you see that space evolving?
Sure. So Abhishek, two things have happened, right? I mean, when as Corteva, one of the values of Corteva is live safe. So like all companies, when COVID pandemic set in, we first told our employees and our channel members, stay off. I mean, stay at home. They stayed at home. I mean, they of course were categorized as essential workers. They did have the official pass to go out, but we couldn't allow them to go out and be exposed over there. So we had to tell them to stay home. But that meant that it's not, I mean, the season was passing. There was a Kharif, there was a Rabi, there was a rainy season. You had to do, I mean, the growing will not stop, the sowing will not stop. So how do these, channel partners of ours, how do our employees go and talk to the farmers about the newer practices? It gets important that every season you need to connect. How are you going to keep up the connect with the customers? And that is where we saw the way the entire programs like group talk. Group talk is just a single call where you can get about 400, 500 farmers on the call, and you're talking to them. So this was, the entire farm, the panchayat gathering or the fair gathering, or where our sales folks used to go and speak to them, do demonstrations, have completely moved from there to a digital platform. The number of Zoom conversations our teams did was amazing. And they had, and the entire setup was done exactly. They had a demonstration done. They did a quick video in terms of pre and post use of, and how to use, what is a stewardship, what methods, what should you do to ensure safety, all of that, what you would have spoken in person, talking to a farmer face to face, now actually went into the digital platforms. And that, I think, kept both our employees safe and also ensured that we are relaying that to our farmers that, it is important for you all to stay safe. It did when now the pandemic is receding and we are hoping that the season opens up a little bit more. I feel that this process of communicating with the farmers will still stay. It possibly will become hybrid. I mean, we do want to reach out to our customers in person and want to talk to them and do. But I think this hybrid conversations in terms of using the digital platforms and using in person will continue. I think just like all of us, right? I mean, we may not go back to office 5 times a week right now. We may go like 2 or 3 times. I think same is the case with how we want to keep in touch.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing that, Bhavna. We have a question from Damini, and she's asking that is digital marketing being used for the farming community only for short-term goals, or can it be used for long-term campaigns, given the fact that communication channels are constantly changing?
So interestingly, I mean, the temptation would be to start using the digital marketing channels for short-term, quick product-related goals, right? But I think, learned it over the last 15, 18 months that these channels can be used to start seeding our brand messaging also. Because what happens is right now, you're closer to the farmer than you were before. You're able to reach out to the farmer and land a particular message many more times than you would have done if you see them in person, or if you're landing through through an advertisement or through a TV commercial. So right now, the kind of channels we are talking about, the frequency is much more. It is much more personal. So if I'm seeing the story on the social media on my phone, my relatability is increasing. So we thought, I mean, I think this is the best way. This is a great opportunity for us to start, communicating our larger brand stories there and get the entire positioning up through these channels.
So I have another question from Karishma. Karishma is from Kellogg. So her question is that what are the key metrics of success that you're using for your program? I think Karishma, she means the Prabhupta program.
Sure. So Karishma, this is something which we always struggle with, right? I mean, every time we say what are the KPIs, and the KPIs keep moving. So there are two things we look at it. We look at the efforts metrics as to how much, what is the kind of outreach we are doing. How many people are we reaching out to? How many, like for example, the Prabhupta program, we have about 90,000 Prabhuptas in the last 18, 20 months. And how many times have we reached out to them? So that is the number of effort we reached out. But the other thing what we look at is the conversions. So if these Prabhuptas have landed into another 5 other women and converted them into Prabhuptas. So 90,000 is a top layer for us. And the second layer, how many have these 90,000 converted? So conversion metrics is the second metrics we look at. And the third metrics, of course, is the engagement metrics in terms of when we do look at social media. I mean, it's all out there for us to see, right? I mean, we look at our organic growth on our Facebook pages. We have Facebook page for rice, for corn, for different products, for different geographies. And we very constantly monitor how this is growing organically, what are the engagement levels. So the usual metrics are also being observed very closely. I hope I answered.
Karishma, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I might just add to this. I mean, the one is the measurable impact of the reach, right? I mean, I think the challenge, or the one for us to all address, is the authenticity of the PR message, right? That is just, there's no method right now to be able to calculate that, right? In terms of trust factor when you read a third party. I mean, we were, discussing some time back that, a Times of India article has greater credibility, and or an article as an advocacy piece appearing as greater credibility, and how the sales team is able to utilize that piece as an authentic piece to go out and pitch to customers, then going with a brochure, right? So
Abhishek, I have actually a good example. Thanks for talking about it. When we did the COVID, we did a lot of work for COVID care. I mean, we set up these community centers, we did the vaccine drives, we did a lot of work. But somehow our employees, we did multiple town halls for our employees to know that these things are happening. But somewhere our employees always came back and said, what have you done for us for COVID? I'm like, okay, we just did like 5 town halls in the last 2 months. Why are people still not able to relate? But then what we did was, and I think some of our leaders went up and put this up on the LinkedIn. They just spoke about what is the work we did, and then acknowledged some of how our COVID warriors came into play and how they have become the foot soldiers and helping us. suddenly everybody in the organization was talking about, oh, this is fantastic, you're doing some great work. So I think that, I mean, Abhishek, to your point, I think the credibility of an external platform, the minute this comes from a credible external platform, the believability becomes that much important. I mean, it becomes that much easy, right? So we have leveraged both for internal communications and for external to how are we telling the story, how much of believability we're able to land. I think that's something which we've very nicely seen in the last few days, especially when we are interacting with some of our both our policymakers and influencers, and also our the other side in terms of talking to our farmers and our consumers.
Thank you, Bhavna. This has been a wonderful conversation. If we have some more questions, you can send it to us and we'll request Bhavna to answer them later. I hate to bring this session to a close, but we have yet another very interesting session waiting for us with Nawaz. I'd just like to share the poll results from Bhavna's session. It's actually extremely it's really interesting what people are saying. So, according to them, the chief takeaway that they have found from the session, Bhavna, is the fact that platforms such as WhatsApp are being used. So that is the major takeaway that they're going back with from your session. So that's extremely interesting to know that resonated with the audience as well. The other thing, obviously, is big surprise and takeaway is the YouTube influencers. So that's also a big takeaway for them. And a little bit to my surprise, outcome-based communication is something they still want to know more about and experiment with. So probably more conversations are needed around that on how to do outcome-based communication for sectors, very key sectors such as this. So thank you so much, Bhavna. We can't thank you enough. And sharing about this fantastically interesting and very, very core sector. It's still the main driver of our economy. We often forget that. And thank you for joining us, Bhavna.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.